Thanks. Good morning. My name is Joe Brockmeier. I work for Red Hat. I'm in the open source and standards group, but they did not just send me out here because I'm a pretty face. I also work, my official title is something like doer of things. I heard you laughing. That wasn't meant to be a joke. Kind of official title is doer of things around Project Atomic. I like it when people talk about the presentations on Twitter for those playing along at home. My nick is JZB on Twitter. Or if you want to talk about Project Atomic, it's at Project Atomic. And I bet the organizers here, who I would like to thank for having me out, would like it if you guys talked about container camp on Twitter as well. So what I want to do is give a real fast introduction to Project Atomic. We've only got 25 minutes, so this can only go so deep. And probably listening to me after the last fellow is going to be like slowing it down to 33 1/3, because he was fast. I'm not quite that hyped up this morning. I'm still on East Coast time. Haven't had enough coffee for that, but we'll try to get through. So what I'm going to talk about, what is Project Atomic? I'm going to talk about the anatomy of an atomic host, because there seems to be, there's always a lot of confusion about what constitutes an atomic host versus, another host in the Red Hat family. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's coming soon with Project Atomic. There's a lot of good things going on. And then I'll talk very briefly about getting involved. I'm going to talk a little bit about Fedora, CentOS, and RHEL. What I do want to make really clear at the outset is I'm not a product guy on the RHEL side, so when I talk about coming soon things, I'm really talking about community-facing stuff. So when I talk about things that are in the community, for the purposes of people in PR, that should not be interpreted as a guarantee that that will ever show up in a product. So I'm going to assume, because you all are here for container camp, I don't need to explain containers, right? Anybody still unclear on the whole Docker concept? Talk to me after class if you are. How many people are actually, this is a discussion we have a lot, how many people are actually in real world production using containers right now? Okay. How many people are getting ready to roll out containers? And how many people are just here to see like what the heck the hype is all about? Okay, good. It's a good mix. So let's talk about what is Project Atomic. This gets a little bit confusing because it involves a lot of upstream projects and 3 distributions. So Project Atomic 101, this is a project for coordinating the work to develop atomic hosts, the patterns and the tools that are required to develop an atomic host. This is an umbrella project, so a lot of my work is actually going between Fedora and CentOS and some of the internal developers at Red Hat and trying to coordinate things so we can all share the work, not to mention the stuff that's going upstream into Docker, upstream into Kubernetes, side projects like Cockpit. But the most important thing, or one of the most important things to take away, is this is not a new distribution. We aren't creating a 4th distribution to sit in the Red Hat family. What we're doing is reusing the same packages and tools that we have used before to build RHEL or CentOS or Fedora, the OSs that many of you already know and trust and use in your data center. So why, you can run Docker and Kubernetes on Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Fedora or CentOS. You don't actually need to use Atomic. So why do you want this? We want to provide a streamlined host for running these things. One of the things that I keep telling people in the development community is you shouldn't ever be logging in directly to the atomic host. This is where you run your containers, but you should have like hundreds of these things running in your data center. You shouldn't actually be worrying about like logging into a specific host. You shouldn't be worrying about the care and feeding of these, to use the pets and cattle metaphor some people like, some people don't like. All of the applications, the philosophy is all the applications that are running on Atomic should be deployed as containers. That means that we want a immutable host that you can't install regular RPMs on. We want the updates to be easy to deploy and manage. So that's why we are doing all this work to have a streamlined host for running containers. What does the host provide? It should be very minimal, but basically it's going to be based on CentOS, Fedora, or RHEL, and it's going to provide a program called rpm-astree, or a set of tools. It's going to provide user bin atomic, which I'll explain in more detail. Obviously, it's going to provide Docker. We're also looking at packaging and using Rocket. For those of you who follow the wild adventures of Leonard Pettering, we're also looking at some of his work on InSpawn. So there are different things that we're considering running, not just necessarily Docker containers on Atomic. Obviously, we're going to be using Kubernetes for management and orchestration of containers. Cockpit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. If I had more time, I would do a demo, because Cockpit is kind of fun to look at and really the only thing with any fun GUI bits to actually look at. Atomic hosts, this is actually provided to the side, but these, for RHEL, customers have super privileged containers for doing things that they can't install on the host, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So what won't they provide? It's an immutable file system tree, so that means you can't just yum install, or with Fedora these days, DNF install a package. These are supposed to be very minimal systems. They could do with a little bit of slimming. We had a conversation this morning on the Fedora side because somebody snuck in screen because they just really want to have screen, and I'm like, it's 2015, learn to use tmux, that's enough, okay? But anyway, what they won't provide is more than necessary. Which one should you be using? This is another thing that people have a lot of questions about is, okay, so I want to run an Atomic host, where should I start? Well, if you want support, you want RHEL. All of the components, though, should be, aside from different versions and some differences in development and maybe some extra things in Fedora or CentOS, they're all the same stack, more or less. CentOS Atomic, currently under development. We've been working in an Atomic, the CentOS SIG. How many folks have heard of CentOS SIGs? Not very many. Okay, just a little quick note. If you're doing anything interesting to develop on top of the operating system, after Red Hat partnered with CentOS last year, they introduced special interest groups to do things like Zen on CentOS or other things. So if there's something that you want to do on top of that, the SIGs are a structure for doing that. We have SIGs for virtualization and cloud and storage, things like that, that go beyond what would normally come with stock CentOS. Fedora 21 released an Atomic host in December, developed by the Cloud Working Group. So if you want a short-term, project that gets updates, Fedora 21 is a good option. And a CentOS rebuild of RHEL Atomic host is coming very soon. Probably, it'll be before Christmas, hopefully before Independence Day. I just won't say which one in Larry Wall fashion. That was supposed to be funny. See, I don't see why people were laughing at the pretty face thing, but not at the actual jokes. All right, so let's talk a little bit about rpm-astree. So this was initially developed by Colin Walters for GNOME Continuous. Anybody heard of that? Basic philosophy was, if you're doing GNOME development, actually compiling GNOME was not a whole lot of fun. So Colin Walters came up with kind of a Git for operating systems to quickly compile a test bed for GNOME that you could actually use to have different trees of GNOME on your system. You could actually switch back and forth between, say, a Fedora Rawhide-based GNOME with the latest development and a Fedora 21 GNOME that was stable. Something breaks, you just, do a quick reboot and you're back in the working system. So it provides, as I said, a bootable, immutable, and versioned file system. Okay? It works on top of any Unix file system. It doesn't really care whether it's ext4 or whether it's XFS or something else. It works on top of any regular Linux file system or Unix type file system that handles the usual GID, UID stuff. And it has support, unlike Git, for preserving the UIDs and GIDs, for the extended attributes, for handling the bootloader, and some other things. So Atomic updates, they make a lot more sense for a system that's doing everything in the container and for immutable systems. You basically want an update. You don't want to run an update and worry about a whole bunch of packages. You want to push out an update, reboot into it, and have the whole system and not worry about it. We preserve the tooling, however, that we are already using to create the RPMs that are used to build RHEL or Fedora or CentOS. So we didn't have to reinvent the wheel when we decided to have this slimmed down host. We could use the same tooling that we're already using for development, and you get the same trusted packages that, that you would use in your other operating system and that you might use in the containers. It's also a very clean transaction for updates. It either succeeds or fails, which is kind of important. I'm going to talk about it at a very high level. So basically, you're rolling out an update. Everything on the file system is read-only except var, where you map all of your data, your home and whatever to, and etc, where obviously all your configuration is at. When you do an update, it does a three-way merge for etc, so all of your changes are preserved. All data, all your containers, and all that good stuff is unchanged on update. You have a problem with an upgrade, rpm-astree rollback, and you're good. User bin atomic. Anybody heard of this yet? Other than Jason? Okay. Dan Walsh actually came up with this. What user bin atomic is an easy way to manage a system, and it's an entry point for managing both the containers and the host updates. So it's sort of right now a wrapper for Docker, and it provides a couple of extra features. So, for example, with Docker labels now, we can actually put in additional information about how a container should be run. And so when you do an atomic run on something, it can read the label and supply all of the additional, all the stuff that you have to type in to give a Docker container privileges or network information or things like that. You can provide it in the Docker file in the label, and Atomic will see that and use it without you having to do this long, hideous command line. The atomic host command is used for all of the updates and whatnot. We are also working on, eventually, Atomic will actually be something you can run on your desktop and point at, say, 3 or 4 nodes or several nodes that are running Atomic so that you don't even have to log into the system to use it. The Cockpit project is something that started prior to Atomic, but Atomic hosts are shipping with this. It is a server manager. For those of you who remember, what was it, Webmin? It's sort of like that, except without all the glaring security holes. And it's a real handy interface for working with the system. They're adding access controls so that you can give an admin all the access that they need, whereas I can log in as a regular user and I might have the permission to run Docker containers but not, say, reboot the system. It doesn't interfere with normal admin tools, so it doesn't overwrite your changes if you go in and you edit something or you use some sort of configuration management like Ansible to change things. It's designed to be multi-server, so you can spin up cockpits on your desktop, for example, and point it at, say, 40 hosts in your data center and manage them all from your desktop. It's got support now for managing containers and Kubernetes. The latest version is .5.3 or something like that, and that'll be in Fedora 22, should show up in the CentOS builds pretty soon. If you want more information on that, it's just at cockpitproject.org. Like I said, if I had more time, I would do a demo, but this is just one quick shot from the interface drilled down. I'm actually looking at a container running on a system. So basically, from the web interface, I can drill down and run individual containers. I can put in Kubernetes configurations and run things that way directly from the Cockpit interface. Something that's caused maybe a tiny bit of controversy recently, I wanted to talk about. We ship Docker, and we ship Docker with a couple of extra changes that we think benefit the enterprise customers. These are appearing in the Red Hat Enterprise Linux Docker. We mostly ship vanilla Docker, and we try to make sure anything that we want to do with Docker, we try to upstream first. So, Dan Walsh or Vincent Batts are working on a feature that we would like to see. They're working upstream, submitting it as a pull request, and sometimes they're accepted, sometimes they're, like, we like the feature, but maybe do it differently, and sometimes they just don't get accepted. In this particular case, we negotiated with Docker to go ahead and ship this in our version, but Solomon and some other folks aren't thrilled about the feature. We provide additional registries for Docker search and Docker pull out of the box. We have the rel registry so that our customers on the rel side can grab content that they want to run in containers. Docker search will list the fully qualified names. One of the things that a lot of people get into bad habits about, I know that I do, is you don't really pay that much attention to the provenance of an image, right? You look at the short name docker pull busybox, and you may not know exactly where that is coming from. You have the ability to block registries. So in a company, if you don't want people to be pulling from the main Docker registry, if you want to restrict them to your internal private registry, you can do that. Admins can do that with our version of Docker. And you can warn on a push so that you don't accidentally upload something with corporate secrets into the Docker Hub, which I think is a pretty nice feature. You won't accidentally, oh, hey, look where we put that database with all the credit cards, right? So another thing, not exactly shipping with Atomic, but something that is very useful with Atomic are super privileged containers. This is another concept that Dan Walsh came up with. And the idea is that if you're not installing anything on the host, if you're not able to install things on the host, there are things that you still need to be able to do to troubleshoot or work with systems that are erratic or something like that. So we have basically come up with a way to easily run Docker containers that can do things on the host and then be removed when they're no longer needed. They can be run with the atomic run command, and again, saves the need for all the extra privilege typing that you need to do. So these things currently are available for RHEL. The RHEL Atomic Tool Containers package, this is basically the sysadmin bundle, is the way that I think about it. So this is something you can drop onto a system, do your work, and remove it when you're done. This is the sysadmin toolkit. We also have an rsyslog image for people who want to aggregate the logs from their containers. So you drop this onto a system, and it will go ahead and feed the logs from that system to a centralized location. And another image is the SADC container. So if you want to use sysstat with SAR, you can do that. And we're looking at basically recreating these for the CentOS and Fedora communities so that if you want to run these things out in the community, you can do that. And the Fedora and the CentOS Docker file repositories are open on GitHub, and we would welcome anybody who has other ideas for super privileged containers that might be useful for other things. We also are providing, this is sort of tangential, but like the CentOS and the Fedora projects are providing images of things that are useful to people based on those distributions, like Nginx or FreeIPA, things like that. How many people are Simpsons fans? Okay. Fewer than I expected. Okay. So a project that we just spun up recently is Nulecule, which if you're a Simpson fan, you will recognize the name. Basically, this is a specification and implementation for multi-container applications, so with dependencies. So we want you to be able to install a full stack rather than having to worry about individual containers. You want to be able to do atomic install foo and get like, something like Colab. Anybody familiar with Colab, free groupware server? It's, if I remember correctly from the conversation I had at FOSDEM, it's something like 20 plus containers plus Kubernetes definitions. Probably something you don't want to have to grab all by hand. So we're trying to create a specification where you can just do atomic install foo, and you would grab the entire dependency set for Colab and set it up. Developers can specify the way the application should be run and the generic configurations that should apply across the board, and then the sysadmin can specify what's necessary for their environment. Creates orchestration parameters for Kubernetes, and we're working on policy-based orchestration via Mesos. So we're pulling in a number of things there. If you want to see development on this, or you want to see more information, it's on GitHub/Project Atomic Nulecule. And in fact, if you go look at our Project Atomic on GitHub, you'll find a number of different projects that we're working on. I won't talk a lot about Kubernetes because I think there are some folks from Google here that are going to be talking about Kubernetes, and he's shaking his head. He's like, yes, I can do this better than you. Just move on. But basically, we are providing Kubernetes as sort of the default set for orchestration of containers. And real fast, I want to talk about the different communities we're doing the work in and encourage folks to get involved there. So Fedora Atomic, all of the work is being done through the Cloud Working Group, and it's part of the Cloud Edition or product. The first release was in Fedora 21. We're adding some new image formats, for example, a Vagrant box for Fedora 21, which has been too long in coming. Updated Cockpit, Docker, all those good things. I think 1.6 just went into updates testing. And we're looking at moving to a 2-week development cycle in Fedora so people can follow along and play at home with all the development work that's going on. So you can get a very fast-moving atomic host if you want to live on the leading edge or if you want to help with development on the operating system level for all these things. On the CentOS side, the work is being done through the CentOS Atomic SIG. And CentOS Atomic hosts, as I mentioned before, they're still in development. We haven't released something yet. Despite a couple of blog posts I saw that were a little misguided, we haven't released anything we're calling stable yet. So if you run everything, we'd love to have testers. We should be dropping a RHEL-based rebuild very soon. We'd love people taking a look at that and helping us with testing. But if it breaks, you get to keep both pieces for free. And we're making no warranties about that right now. And we're also going to be doing a Devel, a 4-week cycle build that will basically be packages that we're getting ready to move into RHEL Atomic. And you can follow along with the next level, the higher level development there. If you want to get involved, website is just projectatomic.io. GitHub is on github/projectatomic. For those of you who prefer to do Facebook, which is weird, but there are people who follow us on Facebook, it's just Facebook/projectatomic, Twitter @projectatomic, and the mailing lists are listed on projectatomic.o/community. The mailing lists are not terribly frightening. They're medium traffic, so you can wade in there without fear. They're not like the fire hose that Fedora Devel is. So, and we keep it pretty on point. There aren't a lot of bike shedding discussions there. So thanks very much. I think my time's about up.
That's good. Yeah, thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks.
Big round of applause.
All right.